Recently, we were sitting down, having coffee, having a laugh, and I brought up this question. I said, guys, what do you know about Bitcoin? One of them said, you only need that if you're a criminal, right? And the other guy said, I just saw the price of that going down, so I realized I didn't need to worry about that anymore. I was really surprised by those answers because I'm a believer. I have some Bitcoin, and I do believe that it can no longer be ignored. One reason, just one reason why that's the case, is that Bitcoin, all of it, is now worth around about 2 trillion US dollars. I think that number surprises a lot of people who think that it's just a small thing, it's insignificant, and it's going to go away. It's not going to go away. That's $2,000 billion worth of a brand new asset. Now, let me be very clear. I'm not going to suggest that you go and buy Bitcoin or sell Bitcoin for that matter. What I don't want is that you get caught flat-footed in a conversation where Bitcoin becomes the topic and you just can't make a meaningful contribution to that conversation. So today in this video, I'm going to share 3 reasons why Bitcoin exists. Folks, welcome back to Low TED. We are learning one thing every day. My name's Wayne. I run Learn Well Books. We're an international best-selling book publishing house. We publish books in the 5 most important areas of life. That's health, relationships, money, mindset, and productivity. We believe strongly that anyone that focuses their attention and tries to master those 5 areas of life is going to have a fantastic life. And what a privilege that we get to share information about each of these 5 topics with you. Now let me ask you, where were you in 2008 as the financial world was falling apart? I remember where I was. I was in Sydney, Australia, and I went down to meet with a friend of mine. He sat there amidst the financial turmoil all around us. He said, the GFC, the global financial crisis, has given all of us an excuse to be poor. Now this guy had been an entrepreneur all of his life. He was going through a very difficult financial period in his business. And he made that remark because it was true. Anyone had an excuse to be poor at that point because everyone, it seemed, literally all around the world was being negatively affected by what some people had done. Do you know, as I have done the research for this video, I've discovered some things that are just so bad, just so bad. The financial system, made up of a collection of banks and money managers and a whole host of other characters in this whole weird play, had been creating these synthetic financial instruments and selling them to very unsuspecting people like you and I, who were investing in things because we thought we could trust the banks and the money managers and the whole financial system. And eventually, the things that they'd been selling were proven to be worthless. As all of that played out, it left the American government, amongst other governments around the world, with a very difficult situation. They faced losing their entire financial system and the complete destruction of their economy. So in fact, what they didn't do was go to the banks and say, guys, you have royally screwed this up and you now need to fix it. You need to deal with the consequences of your fraudulence, your corruption, and your complete mismanagement of your financial responsibilities. They didn't do that. They took out a checkbook and wrote a check, just the first one amongst many that followed, for $700 billion. Imagine that, causing so much destruction. And then the people that you're supposed to be accountable to, amongst many, the government, they come along and they say, let me help. Here's all the money that you've lost in order to restore you to conduct the same activities that you used to conduct. Now, if you're wondering if all these people went to jail, I can tell you that they didn't. The only person out of this whole mess that actually went to jail was a guy called Kareem Seragandal, who was a middle manager at Credit Suisse, who spent 30 months in prison. I mean, I'm not going to go into the details of how crazy and bad that is, but it's crazy and bad. Now, let's get back to Bitcoin for a second though, because there are 3 reasons that Bitcoin exists. Bitcoin emerged in 2008. It's interesting, isn't it? It's been around for 17 years, and yet we still treat it like it's a bit of a mystery and a bit of a surprise guest in conversations and in the financial system. But it's been around for 17 years. That's a pretty good track record. Now, In 2008, it emerged in response to three things. It's got, amongst many, three reasons for existing. The first one is inflation. Now, I'm not here to give you an economics lesson. That's not my thing, and this is not that conversation. But when the government handed over that $700 billion, the way it happened in very short form is the Fed just made more money, gave that to the government, and the government gave that to the banks. Now, you might think, okay, that's cool, needed to sort of sort things out. But let me just give you an analogy for how this works. Let's say, just hypothetically, you are a shareholder in Amazon. In fact, you're one of two shareholders in Amazon, just you and Bezos. You own 50%, he owns 50%, you own half of Amazon. Great. You start making your own financial plans around that. You start budgeting according to the cash flow, and you're like, right, that's my income. Brilliant. Then a week later, you get an email from Bezos. He says, oi, just want to let you know, I've actually created a new share and given that to one of my mates. Now there's three. You're like, wait, what? No, no, what? I had 50%, now I've got 33. And it takes you a little while to get used to that fact, but you're like, oh, well, that's not great. But you're like, oh, there's still a lot of money, I'll be okay, and you barrel on. Another week goes by and you get another email saying, listen, I've created another share and I've given that to another friend. Now there's four. All of a sudden you've got 25%. And then the next week you've got 20% and on and on and on. And all of a sudden you're surrounded by millions of other shareholders who all dilute your access to the value of Amazon. Now that analogy applies perfectly to money. If you had one of only $200 bills, you effectively own half of the economy. But if every time the government dumps $700 billion into the economy, every dollar you have is worth a lot less. That's the impact of something like a bailout. Now, the bailout is just one event in the money printing chaos that the government is enacting. And every time they do it, your money, my money, becomes worth less and less and less. Now, that's a fairly long-winded version of how we get to why Bitcoin exists. It's for the sake of inflation. You see, Bitcoin, there will only ever in the fullness of time, ever be 21 million Bitcoin. There'll never be more than that. Here's another little fact about Bitcoin that not a lot of people know. I think each Bitcoin is made up of Satoshis. Consider Satoshis like the cents of Bitcoin, like the cents of a dollar. Satoshis, there are 100 million Satoshis in every Bitcoin. Isn't that interesting? You can very easily see then that Bitcoin will be used as money in the form of Satoshis, where things will be priced in Satoshis. In fact, that's happening in several countries around the world, but that's part of a whole other conversation. But for the sake of inflation, Bitcoin exists to never, ever suffer the consequences of a government that just keeps on diluting and diluting the money supply. It's just impossible to do that with Bitcoin. So imagine holding a Bitcoin, and some of you might. You own one, or as many as you do, of a limited supply. How many things in life do you own that are truly finite? Even the supply of gold is increasing by 2% per year. So that's diluting the value of gold all the time. That's the first point. What did we learn in that? We learned that there's only 21 million Bitcoin. There are 100 million Satoshis in each Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is inflation proof. Interesting. Money is certainly not. And as time goes on, we keep on seeing money being eroded more and more and more. Buying Bitcoin feels like jumping off a sinking ship onto land. Let's go to the second reason that Bitcoin exists. In 2008, there was this shocking event where the government just threw money at the problem. But 2008 also exposed ridiculous corruption. 2008 meant that all the trust that we used to have in the financial system cracked, and we could just never look at a bank the same. We just look at them and go, what are you actually up to in there? And I think that that's the prevalent thought for most people who paid any attention to what happened during 2008. So I don't know, do we have to deal with the banks? Frankly, do we have to deal with the government? And the answer is, unfortunately, yes, whilst we use money as the exchange of value. But Bitcoin was created, and in its first line of code, let's call it, it refers to Bitcoin as a peer-to-peer exchange. Peer-to-peer, that's me to you. If you've got Bitcoin and I make a great video that you want to pay for, let's say, you could give me a couple of Satoshis. And I'd say, fantastic, thank you. No banks involved. You just simply send it to my address. It's completely decentralized. Money is attached to the government. It's made by the government. It's transmitted through banks. It's fiddled with by all the various steps in the process of moving money from one person to the next. Whereas with Bitcoin, those steps just don't exist. It's truly peer-to-peer and it's completely decentralized. What that means is that the government can't just shut down your account. You won't get a letter from the bank saying, we've been ordered to freeze your assets. And no one can say, you can't transfer that amount of money, you can't withdraw that amount of money, what are you doing with that money? Those intermediaries just do not exist. It's just you and me exchanging something of value. Now, the downside of that is that no one is going to bail you out if you make a mistake. If you send your Bitcoin to the wrong person, if it goes missing, there's no insurance. There's no government that's going to step in and say, oh, don't worry, we'll cover you. It's the ultimate responsibility for your financial transactions and circumstances. And some people are just not ready for that or comfortable with it. My personal opinion, though, is that I don't need someone else's guardrails. I want the responsibility, because we've seen what happens when we hand responsibility to these third-party organizations. They've proven that they can't be trusted. So that's the second reason. Here's number 3. It's transparency. You know, back in 2008, the banks were doing some pretty shady business. They had created what's called synthetic financial products. Things like CDOs, collateralized debt obligations, mortgage-backed securities, and a host of other things. No one really knew what was inside these products, but they were being sold hand over fist to millions of people, and they caused immeasurable damage to the lives of good people who were trusting that the banks were doing the right thing. Well, with Bitcoin, that just doesn't exist. There is complete transparency. Did you know that you can go to a website and download the entire Bitcoin ledger? Consider it like a spreadsheet where every single time that anyone, anywhere in the world has transacted with Bitcoin from one person to another, there is a record in the Bitcoin ledger that documents that transaction. And that ledger, that spreadsheet, if you like, can be downloaded by anyone, anywhere, for free. And every time you conduct a transaction on the ledger will be updated. You see, when you transact on Bitcoin, you're using a Bitcoin address. It's just a series of numbers and letters, but it doesn't identify you personally. So with your Bitcoin identity, you can jump onto the ledger, create a transaction, transact with another Bitcoin address, and everyone can see that your address and that address conducted that transaction. And when you look at the ledger, you can verify the total supply. Despite all the fraud and the corruption that was exposed back in 2008, those activities probably paused for about 3 minutes before they all wound back up again. And those non-transparent financial products that the banks have created are still available today. Let's quickly recap. What are 3 reasons why Bitcoin exists? Number 1, it protects against inflation. It is a truly finite resource. If you own 1 Bitcoin, you own one of only 21 million, and there'll never be more than that. Secondly, decentralization. It's removed banks, governments, and any other third party being involved in your financial transactions. It's truly a peer-to-peer mechanism of value exchange. And finally, complete public transparency. Anyone can look at everything that happens on the Bitcoin ledger. Now, this is by no means a complete study of Bitcoin at all, but what I do hope is that this conversation has left you equipped for whenever the topic of Bitcoin comes up in a conversation that you're a part of. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this information helpful, and remember, if you want to be interesting, you've got to stay interested. That's why we learn one thing every day. I'll see you tomorrow.